And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last weekend.
Yeah, they have nothing else to talk about. Maybe you should get the lawyer that worked on that Covington Catholic school case. What was that, a $200 million settlement?
But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it.
It is the show that people love to hate.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested hen house.
And picture this, a single lawsuit for $100 million that sent shockwaves through daytime television and had Joe Rogan absolutely demolishing one of TV's most protected hosts. We're talking about a legal bomb so massive it could fund a space mission, instead aimed directly at The View's heart. What started as typical daytime drama exploded into a full-scale media war that's rewriting the rules of accountability in broadcasting. This isn't your average celebrity feud or Twitter spat gone wrong. This is the moment when traditional media met its match, and the aftermath is still sending tremors through Hollywood.
The culture shift between right and left authoritarianism, and now people don't recognize that if you just stop looking at it in terms of red and blue, look at the actions, whether it's war, suppression of free speech, pharmacological interventions that are mandatory, whatever it is, that used to all be associated with the authoritative right, the authoritarian right, and now those things are being embraced by the left. And I just think it's just an ideology thing, and I think we get confused and we think we're on the right side, and if it's our side that's saying this, for sure that's the right thing to do, and no one's critically thinking about this.
Joe Rogan is the gateway drug for young men that thought they were Democrats to become MAGA. Joe Rogan is the bridge. And on that bridge,
The chaos began when Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, organized what should have been a routine conservative youth summit. 5,000 high school and college students traveled across the country, spending their summer weekend listening to speakers and engaging in political discussions. Nothing unusual there, right? But The View saw an opportunity to attack, and what they allegedly said next would trigger one of the most expensive lawsuits in daytime TV history. According to the legal filing, the hosts didn't just criticize the event or its organizers, they allegedly made specific damaging claims about the young attendees themselves, suggesting connections to extremist groups. We're talking about teenagers and college kids who suddenly found themselves branded on national television with labels that could follow them for life.
CEO of Turning Point USA and the author of the new book, The College Scam. So Charlie, do you accept The View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis,
Kirk wasn't having it. These weren't seasoned political figures or public personalities who signed up for media scrutiny. These were students, some as young as 16, who attended a legal political event and ended up allegedly smeared on national television. The legal team made it clear this crossed every line from opinion into outright defamation territory. When you attack private citizens, especially minors, with unsubstantiated claims about extremist ties, you're not doing journalism. You're potentially destroying lives and futures. Enter the nuclear option, a $100 million lawsuit that made headlines everywhere. This wasn't some strategic legal posturing or publicity stunt. Kirk assembled a team of top-tier defamation lawyers, the same caliber that secured massive settlements in cases like Covington Catholic. The message was crystal clear. If you're going to weaponize your platform to attack children, you're going to pay the price. $100 million isn't just compensation for damage. It's a statement that says this behavior ends now. Scale alone forced everyone to take notice, from media executives to legal experts who knew this could set precedent for how networks handle controversial commentary.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
Right.
Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
The lawsuit filing sent ripples through the media landscape, but nobody expected what happened next. That's when Joe Rogan, the podcast king himself, decided to weigh in with the kind of brutal takedown that his millions of listeners have come to expect. Rogan didn't just comment on the legal case, he went full scorched earth on The View's credibility, their fact-checking process, and especially their handling of the controversy. His analysis wasn't some dry legal commentary either. This was vintage Rogan, razor-sharp humor mixed with devastating logic that cut straight to the heart of the matter. What made Rogan's response so savage was how he exposed the absurdity of the situation. Here was The View, supposedly a serious news program backed by ABC News, allegedly throwing around explosive accusations without proper evidence. Meanwhile, Rogan highlighted how his own podcast, often dismissed as unfiltered entertainment, actually had better fact-checking standards. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and Rogan wasn't about to let anyone miss it.
I have no hate for Joy Behar. If I saw her, I'd give her a hug. I'd probably say the same thing about me if I was her. You're worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is fucking great, and Joe Rogan believes in dragons! Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
You know, so I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart, but captured.
Sure, I think
But the real fireworks started when Rogan discovered something that perfectly encapsulated everything wrong with The View's approach. During their attempt to discredit him, the hosts claimed he believes in dragons and that viewers shouldn't trust him over their ABC-backed reporting. The problem, they completely misrepresented what actually happened on his show. Rogan had hosted a wildlife biologist who discussed historical accounts of giant reptiles and unexplained encounters. It was a fascinating conversation about cryptozoology and ancient stories, but The View twisted it into Joe Rogan believes dragons lived alongside people. This dragon controversy became the perfect metaphor for everything Rogan was arguing about. The View's credibility. Here they were, claiming superior fact-checking and journalistic standards while simultaneously proving they either couldn't or wouldn't accurately represent basic information. Rogan broke it down with surgical precision, showing exactly how they took a nuanced scientific discussion and turned it into tabloid nonsense. The humiliation was complete when he pointed out that this happened right after they claimed viewers should trust them because they're run by ABC News. At the center of this media storm stood Sunny Hostin, The View's legal expert and often the voice of authority on the panel. The irony here was almost too perfect to be real. Hostin, with her background as a prosecutor and legal analyst, should have been the one person on that show who understood the dangers of making unsubstantiated claims about private citizens on national television. Her legal training should have been a firewall against exactly this kind of liability. Instead, she allegedly became the face of the reckless commentary that sparked the lawsuit. Rogan didn't miss this delicious irony either. He pointed out how a trained lawyer somehow found herself at the center of a potential legal disaster, despite having the expertise to know better. It was like watching a fire safety expert accidentally burn down their own house. The contrast was stark. Hostin's legal credentials versus her alleged participation in commentary that could cost the network millions. Every lawyer watching probably cringed at the professional implications.
Dangerous.
I had to read the thing about The View because I just thought it was funny.
What's
That's
The
the
View?
only reason why I read that about me.
Dragon lover.
The radio,
All right, tell me
Joy
what this
Behar
is.
was trying to say that I believe in dragons.
Wait, what is this? I just
She
heard
said,
about
I
it.
checked it. I checked it. And then the lady goes, did you double check this? She goes, I checked it. He believes in dragons.
Should be like
you think they lived
Sasquatch,
alongside of
bitch.
people?
Wait,
It was from a wildlife biologist who came on my podcast. It was from Forrest Gallant. Gallant? Gallant. How do I say his last name? Great guy. I love him. He's awesome. But
Rocky
he was
and Jamie.
saying...
The situation got even more uncomfortable when considering Hostin's other controversial moments, particularly her comments about uneducated voters following the election. Rogan and others seized on this as evidence of the elitist bubble that The View operates in, where complex political and social issues get reduced to simplistic, often insulting characterizations. The pattern was clear, a show that claimed moral and intellectual authority while allegedly engaging in the kind of reckless commentary that destroys reputations and potentially lives. What makes this entire controversy so significant is what it represents about the changing media landscape. For decades, traditional television networks held a monopoly on mass communication and public opinion formation. Shows like The View could make statements, accurate or not, and face minimal consequences because they controlled the narrative, but Rogan's response demonstrated how that power structure has fundamentally shifted. Independent podcasters now command audiences that rival or exceed traditional networks, and they're not afraid to use that influence to call out mainstream media's failures. Rogan's takedown of The View wasn't just entertainment for his audience. It was a demonstration of the new media reality where accountability can come from unexpected sources. When someone with Rogan's reach decides to systematically dismantle a major network's credibility, it creates real consequences. Suddenly, The View found themselves not just facing a lawsuit, but also dealing with viral criticism that reached millions of people who might never have heard about the legal case otherwise. This power shift represents something larger than just podcast versus television. It's about centralized versus decentralized media, corporate messaging versus independent voices, and traditional gatekeepers versus new influencers who built their audiences through authenticity rather than institutional backing. Rogan's ability to humiliate established media figures without any face-to-face confrontation shows how the rules of engagement have completely changed. The legal implications of this case extend far beyond The View or even daytime television. If Kirk's lawsuit succeeds, it could establish new precedents for how media outlets handle controversial commentary, especially when it involves private citizens or minors. The message would be clear: platforms that weaponize their reach to attack private individuals with unsubstantiated claims face serious financial consequences. This could force an industry-wide reevaluation of fact-checking standards and editorial oversight. On the flip side, there are legitimate concerns about the chilling effect on free speech. If every controversial statement risks $100 million lawsuit, media outlets might become so cautious that meaningful discourse suffers. The balance between accountability and free expression is delicate, and this case is testing exactly where those boundaries should be drawn. Legal experts are watching closely because the outcome could influence defamation law for years to come. The cultural implications might be even more significant than the legal ones. This controversy highlights the growing divide between traditional media institutions and the audiences they claim to serve. The View's alleged characterization of Kirk's students as potentially extremists reflects a broader pattern where mainstream media outlets seem increasingly out of touch with significant portions of the population. When thousands of young people attend a political event and get smeared on national television, it reinforces perceptions that traditional media is hostile to conservative viewpoints. Rogan's defense of these students resonated with his audience precisely because it touched on these broader cultural tensions. His critique wasn't just about legal technicalities or journalistic standards. It was about respect for ordinary Americans who engage in the political process without expecting to be attacked by major media outlets. The fact that these were primarily young people made the alleged smears even more offensive to many viewers. The silence from The View and ABC News in response to both the lawsuit and Rogan's criticism speaks volumes about their position, rather than defending their reporting or clarifying their statements. They've largely avoided addressing the controversy directly. This strategy might minimize immediate attention, but it also allows the narrative to be shaped by their critics. In the age of social media and viral content, silence often gets interpreted as admission of guilt or at least embarrassment. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk has used the attention to highlight broader issues about media bias and accountability. The lawsuit isn't just about monetary damages, it's about establishing principles for how media outlets should treat private citizens, especially young people. The case has become a rallying point for conservatives who feel that mainstream media routinely misrepresents their views and attacks their supporters with impunity. The financial stakes alone make this case unprecedented in daytime television history. $100 million represents more than many shows' entire production budgets for multiple years. If The View loses even a fraction of that amount, it could fundamentally change how networks approach controversial programming. Insurance companies, legal departments, and executives would all demand stricter oversight of on-air commentary to avoid similar liability. But the reputational damage might be even more costly than any financial settlement. Rogan's viral takedown exposed The View to criticism from audiences who might never have paid attention to their commentary otherwise. The Dragon controversy alone generated millions of views and countless memes, turning their alleged fact-checking failure into a permanent internet joke. In an era where credibility is everything, this kind of sustained mockery can be more damaging than any lawsuit. I'm Marty Seth Ripple effects are already visible across the media landscape. Other hosts and networks are reportedly revealing their own practices and legal exposure after seeing how quickly a routine commentary segment can explode into a 9-figure lawsuit. The entertainment industry thrives on controversy and hot takes, but the potential cost of getting it wrong has never been higher. Looking ahead, this case could reshape not just how daytime talk shows operate, but how all media outlets balance commentary with fact-checking. The traditional model where hosts could make provocative statements and leave the legal department to sort out the consequences later might be ending. In its place, we might see more cautious, heavily vetted programming that prioritizes legal but safety over viral moments. The outcome will also influence how independent media personalities like Rogan interact with traditional outlets. His successful humiliation of The View demonstrates that podcasters and independent content creators now have the reach and influence to hold mainstream media accountable in ways that were previously impossible. This democratization of media criticism could lead to higher standards across the industry, or it could intensify the polarization between different media ecosystems. Perhaps most importantly, this controversy highlights fundamental questions about trust, authority, and accountability. In modern media, The View's alleged mishandling of the Kirk story and Rogan's brutal response represent competing visions of how media should function in a democratic society. One model relies on institutional credibility and editorial oversight. The other emphasizes individual authenticity and direct audience engagement. The students at the center of this controversy probably never expected their summer weekend to trigger a media earthquake that's still sending shockwaves months later. Their experience illustrates the power of modern media to either elevate or destroy ordinary citizens who find themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. The resolution of Kirk's lawsuit will determine whether they get justice or become footnotes in a larger story about media accountability. As this legal drama continues to unfold, one thing is certain: the old rules no longer apply. Traditional media's monopoly on narrative control is broken. Independent voices have unprecedented influence, and the financial stakes for getting it wrong have never been higher. Whether this leads to better journalism or more cautious programming remains to be seen, but the media landscape will never be quite the same again. The View might survive this particular controversy, but their credibility has taken damage that could last for years. Meanwhile, Rogan's reputation as a truth teller who isn't afraid to challenge powerful institutions has been reinforced. The $100 million question isn't just whether Kirk wins his lawsuit, but whether this case marks the beginning of a new era where media accountability comes from unexpected sources and the price of reckless commentary could bankrupt even the biggest networks. What makes this situation even more explosive is how it exposes the artificial nature of traditional television production. Rogan didn't just attack The View's content, he systematically dismantled their entire operation. He revealed how their audience consists largely of paid attendees rather than genuine fans, explaining that most real supporters probably can't leave the house because they're immobile. This brutal assessment stripped away the illusion of organic popularity that daytime shows desperately maintain. The contrast couldn't be starker. While The View relies on manufactured audiences and corporate backing, Rogan built his empire through authentic connections with millions of listeners who actively choose to engage with his content. When he speaks, people listen not because they're paid to be there, but because they trust his perspective. This fundamental difference in audience relationship gives him credibility that traditional media simply cannot replicate. Behind the scenes, industry insiders report that major networks are scrambling to reassess their legal exposure. The View controversy has become a case study in how quickly routine commentary can spiral into existential threats. Legal departments across the industry are demanding new protocols for fact-checking and editorial oversight, knowing that the next viral mistake could cost hundreds of millions. The irony runs deeper when you consider how The View positioned itself. as the responsible alternative to unfiltered platforms like Rogan's podcast. They claim superior journalistic standards backed by ABC News infrastructure, yet they're the ones facing a massive defamation lawsuit while Rogan's unfiltered approach has proven more accurate. This reversal challenges fundamental assumptions about credibility and authority in modern media. What happens next could determine the future of broadcast television itself. If Kirk's lawsuit succeeds, it establishes that traditional media outlets can't hide behind corporate structures when their hosts make reckless statements about private citizens. The message would echo throughout the industry. Your platform size doesn't protect you from accountability, and attacking ordinary Americans for political points carries serious consequences. The students who attended Kirk's summit have become unlikely symbols in this media revolution. Their experience illustrates how quickly private citizens can become targets of national media attention, and how important it is to have voices like Rogan willing to defend them against institutionals at power. These young people didn't ask to become part of a landmark legal case, but their courage to stand up for their beliefs made them catalysts for change. The cultural implications extend far beyond media criticism into questions about who gets to shape public discourse in America. For decades, a small group of networks and personalities controlled the conversation, deciding which voices deserved platforms and which ideas merited discussion. Rogan's ability to single-handedly shift public opinion about a major controversy demonstrates how that monopoly has permanently shattered. This transformation terrifies traditional media because it threatens their business model at its core. Advertising revenue, corporate partnerships, and institutional credibility all depend on maintaining audience trust and perceived authority. When independent voices can expose their failures to millions of people instantly, the entire foundation of their industry becomes unstable. The View's response strategy of staying silent might seem prudent legally, but it's devastating culturally. In the age of viral content and instant communication, failing to defend your position gets interpreted as inability to defend your position. Every day they remain quiet, Rogan's narrative gains strength while their credibility continues eroding. Looking forward, this case will likely inspire similar lawsuits against other media outlets that have engaged in questionable commentary about private citizens. The legal principle being established here goes beyond any single incident to create new standards for media responsibility. Networks that thought they could say anything about anyone with impunity are discovering that times have changed dramatically. The students at the center of this storm have shown remarkable resilience in the face of national media attention. Rather than being intimidated by the View's platform and reach, they've stood firm in demanding accountability. Their courage has inspired others who face similar treatment from mainstream media, creating a movement that extends far beyond this. Single case. The ultimate legacy of this controversy might be the acceleration of media democratization. When traditional gatekeepers lose their monopoly on narrative control, the result is more diverse voices, more accountability, and more authentic connection between content creators and their audiences. The View's crisis is really a symptom of this larger transformation that's reshaping how Americans consume and trust media. Whether this leads to better journalism or simply different forms of bias remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the era when major media outlets could attack private citizens without consequence has ended. The new rules are still being written, but they're being written by people like Rogan and Kirk who refuse to accept the old power structures as permanent. This $100 million lawsuit isn't just about money or media accountability. It's about who gets to control the story America tells itself, and that control is shifting in ways that would have been unimaginable just a few years ago.